Hello.
Hey guys.
Welcome to the tall and the short of it with
Betsy.
and Jenny, back together again.
And look where we are. Today was our first teacher day back. So we got to sit in meetings and professional development and all
Everyone's favorite.
that fun stuff all day. Yeah.
Oh goodness. So how we spent our summer doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and
We did.
it was Shark Week.
No, it is.
It
Shark
is Shark Week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Remember how we talked about Jenny geeking out about
Yes,
things?
yes.
I kind of like Shark Week. And found myself last night talking to Jenny about a particular show on Shark Week and realized a lot of the words I was using to describe the shark and the seal behavior because they're doing something new over by South Africa. And I was like, oh my gosh. I sound like I'm talking about like the behavior of like talking about, you know, an
Kids
FBA,
coming back to school.
Kids coming back to school, and because I was talking about anxiety, and I was talking about, you know, oh, all this behavior, like you can, there's a purpose, like behavior. Oh, it was,
Yeah.
who knew?
Behavior is behavior. It's all
Yes.
communication.
Yes. So,
And we are definitely not saying your children are sharks.
No.
We're just not saying that.
No.
That's
No.
it.
or seals. Either
Or
way.
seals.
Or seals, yeah. So,
I like seals. I think they're cool.
well, it was very interesting. This episode kind of had the seals had the advantage. So
Yeah.
there we go.
Yes.
They don't usually. So because they were in a new environment, and that's something we're going to talk about.
Yes.
Did you like that? That
That was a good segue.
good segue. There
Good
we go.
segue. Absolutely. So these are just some things to remember as we're sending kiddos back to school. Some people are starting later this week. Some people already started.
Yes.
With
I know
kids.
down towards Indianapolis.
Some people start Monday next week. Some people start Wednesday next week. It depends on your start date. But things for parents and teachers to just remember as we go into a new year and just kind of have at the forefront of our mind going forward. So lots of newness.
Yes, and guys, I mean, teachers, I was telling Jenny last night, the thing to remember is, okay, I'm getting ready to start my 15th year, I think. And this would be my third year in this classroom with this type of setting. So it's not new for me, and teaching in general is not new for me. And I actually have students coming back to my class from last year. So I'm not new to them. They're some of their peers, but it's not the same situation. So no matter what, you may think, well, they've been to school before. You know, they're not at kindergarten, and they're not in kindergarten, or they're not moving to a new building. It's all new.
Right.
New classroom. Like I said, I might be new to some of my students, but they have new peers.
Well, and even you might have moved things around in your classroom.
Which
so
I did.
That's new to them.
I did.
There might be new routines you're introducing that they didn't have before.
I moved where some of my kids sit, you know, from one table to another and stuff. I moved the rug that they sat on for our morning meeting. I turned it. That is going to be big. They're not going to like that.
But that's also good because kids need to learn to adapt to change.
Yes.
And that's totally something we have to teach as special educators for our kids that do struggle with transitions and new things.
Well, because we said, even if a student doesn't have an IEP or doesn't have a diagnosis, all kids struggle. I mean, my nephews are going into just new grades and new teachers, and
all kids and all teachers have anxiety about what's going to happen right at that first part of the year. So just keeping that at the forefront too. And new classmates they might not know if they weren't in their class,
or new kids move in.
Absolutely. So you might see things like old behaviors that you thought were gone popping back up again. That is a pretty common one. They usually will go away again pretty quickly once the child is back into a routine. But if an old behavior pops up, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Just be like, okay, we understand. You have some anxiety about this, or we you know, things are new and we're going to learn this new routine, and hopefully those things will extinguish pretty quickly.
Well, and also along with that, you said old behaviors, but if a child has behaviors listed in an IEP, a behavior plan, they may not match what you're seeing. And they could be old behaviors that you don't know about, or it could be something new, but it's one of those pause. That's what, like, we need a pause button. I'm not saying we ignore it. I'm not saying we don't deal with it, but I'm also saying we don't rush
thinking we need to change the IEP.
We need to collect data.
Exactly.
It's one of those, let's collect some data, let's see.
And you may read a kid's IEP that you're getting for the first time that's like super extensive and there's all these behaviors and all that, and then they come in and it's like nothing's happening. And you're like, what is happening here? So there may be like this honeymoon period where they're, especially if they're high functioning emotional disability student, they may be checking out the environment. What am I going to be able to get away?
They're collecting
data on you
yes.
To see where the loopholes are and where they can cause chaos at sometimes.
Yeah.
So
it's not. I'm not seeing who's.
I know I saw one and then it went away.
I know, but I'm not seeing who they are. So
I know. I always feel bad. Sometimes I do that to people. Like if I see somebody went live and I accidentally touch it, and then I'm like, oh crap, I don't want to be on live with them right now, and then I shut it off. And so I always think people are doing that to us.
It's you.
It's me.
You do that. And so it's one of those, like, just in general, like we also. So I said, teachers, we need to pause. And I'm, like I said, I'm not saying don't work on the situation, but it's also not like, okay, we need to get everybody together. No, you need to collect data so that you're learning, like, okay, I'm noticing it's getting less, as the day goes on, or as the week, school's been in, it gets less. But
I remember, this reminds me, you talking about this reminds me of a situation I had when I was teaching middle school. There was a student who came to 6th grade I was the year I was teaching 6th grade, and it was a brand new building. I was a brand new teacher to him. Everything was new.
You just met. Okay, I was like, you didn't teach in a new building. Okay,
no.
I'm on board.
To him, it was a brand, because he moved to the middle school.
I'm on board.
So, but the very first day, I gave a homework assignment. And I did.
Teacher.
I was that teacher. It was not a big assignment. It was like, go home and ask your parents where you got your name. Something like that. Like, it was like not a big deal, right? So they were supposed to report that the next day when we talked about what we were talking about in my class. And when we came back, he had not done the assignment. And his immediate reaction was just to bust out crying. I mean, 6th grade boy busts out crying because he did not ask his parents where he got his name, and he didn't know, and he was like freaking out that he hadn't done his homework. And so I just said, why don't you go in the hallway? I'll be out there in a minute. So he went out and he's crying in the hallway. And I went out there and I was like, whoa, like what's going on here? And he's like, I didn't ask my mom, and I didn't, and so we just had to have the talk about how in middle school, you're not in trouble if you don't do your homework with me. All you have to do is say, I didn't do it, I'll ask tonight, I'm sorry. And it's over. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? Like, are you okay? Like, and apparently this was a huge deal in his class the year before. That the procedure, if you didn't do your homework, like bad stuff was gonna happen. And so he immediately was just in total, just lost it. And I'm like, yeah, that will never happen with me. You just man up and tell me you didn't do it, and I'll be like, hey, do it in resource or do it tomorrow and give it to me, and then we're good. And he's
I
like,
love that.
okay.
Like, he didn't make it up.
No, he didn't.
How would you have verified?
Right, exactly. He could have told me anything, and I wouldn't have known. But like I said, he was honest. But I that just reminds me of that scenario of there was a procedure in his old class that was totally different in my class, and once he knew what my procedure was, I never had that issue with him again. So
right,
yeah.
Well, and that's, like we said, give it a little bit of time, because if you hadn't done that the first day, it would have maybe taken a couple days. And like we say, that goes also, parents, give teachers a little bit of time to get to know your child.
Yeah.
And, because yes, you can talk and tell them, and that's always great. You guys, parents know their child the best, but at the same time, it's also good to we need some time to get to know the child in this environment. Because I'll be honest, most of the time they act a lot different in school environment than they do do at home.
Yeah.
But yeah, give some time. And I'm not saying don't communicate, don't go back and forth and talk about what's happening and what's going on. But at the same time, give that teacher a little bit of grace in the sense of give them time to build a relationship, because that's what they have to do in order to really start working on those behaviors.
Yeah.
They have to build a relationship, and you can't do that in a week. It just can't. I mean, even like some of my kids are coming back. I have already built a relationship with them, but it's going to take us a little bit of time to, rekindle that relationship.
I love that.
Well, I couldn't think of another word.
That's right.
That's all I could think of.
I love it. So something else just to remember, and this is from a teacher standpoint, is make sure everyone has all the information they need about your kids. I think we get so caught up with what we're doing in our classroom, sometimes we forget, hey, the bus driver needs to know about this behavior plan, or the cafeteria workers might need to know about such and such, or specialist area teachers, let's make sure they're in the know about what's going on with the IEP and how that applies to their class. So just making sure if office staff need to know anything about your student.
And that's something I know we didn't necessarily always give it to our office staff, and we've kind of talked about it. And even like our nurse, like I usually go with my kids to the nurse, but like if they don't, they need to know who these kids, who these kids are that might struggle with some, social
or if they struggle to
or
communicate what's wrong with them, or
so. And that's something we've started giving to our office staff, because I think we think they have all this information at their fingertips.
Sure.
However, they don't necessarily look all of that. I mean, if a kid comes up and just starts chatting with them, they're not going to just look up.
Well, and another situation I can think of is if you have a child who's selectively mute going to a new building, everyone in that building needs to know, have a picture of this kid, and needs to know who her teacher is and all this other stuff, because if that child gets lost, doesn't know where to go, she's not going to talk to anybody. She's going to stand in the hallway and cry until someone finds her that knows who she is. And so all the staff needs to know, or if it's a girl, if it's a boy, whoever, like we need to make sure, like for specific disabilities like that, that everybody's in the know.
Well, and something I like to do is I do sit down, and a lot of times I'll write a list of like, these are the people that need these different this information. However, I make extras because there's always going to be someone I forget. So instead of me going, I'll get that to you, I'm not going to, she'll tell you. By the time I make it back to my room, unless I write it on a Post-it and put it on my head, it's gone. So I try to have them, and if I leave the room, I try to, I just try to have this information so that it's readily available. And, it can always be shredded. It's not, a few extra pieces of paper, but it's just those things that you try to have available, because you can never give them too much information like that.
If they have a specific medical diagnosis, like, the child has Williams syndrome, or the child has fetal alcohol syndrome, like we just talked about a few weeks ago, the teachers might need more information about that specific diagnosis too, to help them understand it.
Yeah.
So that might be something to think about too.
Well, or even something I put on my back to school night thing is food allergies, and which they often might tell the office, but also just food intolerances. I would really like to know if one of my students is going to not like a peanut butter sandwich and puke all over me.
Speaking from personal experience, baby.
So, because, they may like something or want something or choose, yes, I want, because my kids get to choose what they want for lunch, unless I know for a fact they're not going to eat it. That's just not a food they will eat at all, and I want them to eat something. But also, if I know, no, you can't have that, you're allergic. But those are things that are good to know. Or I also have students that little things like you have to watch because they will shove it all in. You have to, just little things like that you notice. But so yeah, like I said, food allergies, but really more also with like intolerances. We do try to expose our kids to as much, new foods, or try to get them to eat things they wouldn't maybe normally eat. However, that can be a fine line.
Yes, for sure.
I'm not a fan of puke.
Ugh.
I can deal with a lot.
I made it through 10 years of teaching, never having had a student puke in my classroom. 10 years.
When I taught middle school, I had one puke. The nurse sent him back.
Now, one grabbed my trash can and went to the hall and did it, but never once in my classroom.
It's been
I lucked out
all over this. I can deal with a lot of bodily fluids. I'm not a fan of. I can do a lot, not that. So.
It seems like when it rains, it pours, doesn't it? Like when one does it, then there's like 16 more.
Let me put it this way: my mom bought me a little like spot carpet cleaner just for me to have in my classroom.
There you go.
If that tells you what kind of things we deal with.
Oh goodness! All right. So another thing is read through, special ed teachers read through the IEPs and make sure if there was any equipment or supplies or anything in the IEP that the district said they were going to buy for that student. Did you get those items? Because sometimes things fall through the cracks. We say something at a spring case conference and we say we're going to get this for next year, or we're going to, try this new thing. And then somewhere in the mix, nobody got told to buy that. So double check and read through those, see if there's anything special, scissors, I don't know, other things like this child needs their own hand wrist thing, or a weighted pencil grip, or
it's usually the smaller pieces of equipment, things like that,
they need to use a slant board.
Well, and here's the thing, a lot of our IEPs, I actually meant to mention this up earlier, a lot of our IEPs are written not necessarily right at the end of the year. They might be written back in February. They might be written back in March. So behaviors can change between February and August. And not saying they happen during the school year, but even kids learn a lot. Goals change. But also, sometimes it's hard to remember what you wrote back in February for the upcoming school year.
Sure. And make sure all the related services they need are in there, like transportation, all of that stuff is where it needs to be, so that kids can get to school and get the therapies they need.
This one, obviously, if a child has an IEP, the special ed teacher is already going to be involved, whether it be a speech therapist, maybe they just, they have a language or speech impairment, all the way through, whatever. They're all going to be involved and be a part of this. However, when school starts, we have a lot of new students that have moved in. We also have, like in my building, we have a whole grade of kindergartners
that we haven't met before.
That we haven't met, or even preschoolers. We usually have met them before they come. But my thing is, when I was the resource teacher, I always tried that first day of school. I would try to just visit the kindergarten classrooms, and I just kind of walk in and stand and walk around, and I would just kind of watch and see and get familiar with the students. But also I'm looking for red flags. We've talked about, okay, these are signs or symptoms of possible autism. Here are signs or symptoms of a language impairment. Here are different things, and I'm just watching.
And we're not diagnosing it at this point by any means, but we want to put, these are some kids I want to keep in the back of my mind as we move forward.
And we've had students that have come and we're noticing they're not speaking. There are, and that could be a red flag. It may not be. But a lot of times I would go in, kind of watch and stuff, and I probably wouldn't necessarily just go in once. I'd go in a little bit later, and before I left, I might say, to the teacher, okay, I'm just kind of watching these three. And I might come back in later, and she's like, the teacher might be like, nope, we're good. I'm like, okay. Or
I just gave them a minute, and now they're okay.
But, and it's one of those, like I said, it's not something I go and call the parent and say, hey, but it's just, okay, let's keep an eye on things. But also teachers, like I said, that's something I did, but I kind of probably started doing it because teachers started saying, hey, could you come take a look? Could you come, could you come observe this child and I'll be honest, for me, when I was a resource teacher, that first week of school, I maybe was a little more flexible because I was still working on
Making a
schedules
schedule
and stuff. So, and it's just one of those, guys, early intervention's the best.
Yeah.
And so we have to know that.
And let me say, this is something that comes up every year too, is you'll have a move-in kid, and it doesn't matter what grade level, and the parent will not indicate that there was an IEP, but there was. So sometimes parents just don't know what to tell the school.
Doesn't know that unless they're told.
Right. So unless the parent indicated that my child has an IEP, they wouldn't know. So they put them in all regular classes, and then all of a sudden the teacher is going, I think there's a problem. So just always alert them to like check with the old school and just say, hey, we're noticing some red flags here. Just look and see, has he been tested? Is there an IEP? Sometimes there's a 504 plan we didn't know about. And sometimes there's, he was tested, he didn't qualify, but he was in an intervention.
Yeah.
Sometimes he was in title services. You know, we find out those things by calling the previous school. So sometimes those red flags.
And we don't necessarily call the school unless we have those. Yeah.
Right.
And like our office is great in that they've learned, they ask that there's a form. Parents, I mean, they have to, it's the very first thing. But sometimes if a child maybe was getting speech services, they don't necessarily see that.
They don't see that as special education, so they wouldn't put yes.
So yeah, those are just things like this first week, especially the first week of school, but it's just a good time for everyone to observe. The kids are observing, and as teachers, it's our time to observe. And I know it's stressful, and it's procedures are so important, and they are, you know. But at the same time, don't be afraid to, you know, ask for another set of eyes, and that kind of thing. And I did say early intervention is the best, and that's so true. However, some of these kids, it's the first time they've ever been in any type of...
And you gotta give them a minute.
Yeah, you gotta give them some time to be like, this is what we do at school. You know, we
might want to let you have a semester of instruction before we try to determine if you have a disability. Yeah.
So, anyways.
Yeah. So I think that's it for today. We have Meet the Teacher night tonight, right?
Yep.
So
what do you mean
we. Nobody comes to meet me. So although I might stay tonight because you just never know. Yeah.
I will be here, and my room actually looks pretty clean.
Yeah. It looks great.
I mean, there's stuff back there, but I think we shared before. I got rid of my desk this year, and so I'm having trouble finding where to put all the little things that you shoved in your desk.
Yeah, that would be a problem for me. I could do it, but it would take a while for me to figure all that out too.
Yeah, and a lot of it I'm deciding I don't need, but
that was minimalist.
I'm trying.
I like it.
I'm trying. Not minimalist. Lesserist. I don't know.
All right, well, that's it for the tall and the short of it today.
Hey, guys, you know what? Join the conversation. I know we talked about things to remember, but I guarantee we forgot them. We've had a busy
give us
day.
Your back to school
We've had a lot of information thrown at us today. So,
especially if you have any cool tips, put them down there in the comments so that we can, use your knowledge to help others.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So join this conversation with us.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye, guys.